Marcus Hayes does a great job covering Philly sports. Of course, see all his stuff on Philly.com. Always has a good take on a lot of things. We'll kind of sprinkle in a little mixed bag today, but we'll start off with a little Sixers with him. Marcus, how you been, pal?
Good, Richie. How you feeling, man?
I'm doing really well. Good to touch base with you, and we'll kind of get into a little baseball and Eagles in a moment. All right, first reaction when you heard the Sixers and Celtics swapping now, and the Sixers getting the top overall pick, and certainly appears that it's going to be Fultz. What's your instant reaction, your take on it?
Well, I've always been a big advocate of if you like a player, especially in the NBA, where if it's a quarterback or an NBA impact player who can score, then you do what you have to do to get that player, because those are the players that make the difference. I think historically that's been proven. And I'm not a big hoarder of assets. I'm not a person who thinks that if you shoot a wide enough, if you shoot a shotgun, you're going to hit something if you use pellets. So
right.
For me, if you think Markelle Fultz is the guy, then you have to go get the guy, because that can make a difference to your franchise for 10 or 15 years. On the flip side, I have yet to talk to one single scout who thinks Markelle Fultz is the guy. So if the reports are true, if they're taking, there are 3 from this year and probably a top 10 from next year from the Lakers, somewhere between 5 and 10, then it's really a lot of money to spend on a guy who's a good player. I don't know that that's the wisest investment. I've seen him play a little bit, but honestly, nobody's seen him play a lot for 2 reasons. Number one, he's a freshman. Number two, as a freshman, he's only played against college players and mediocre college players, because there aren't any great ones anymore because they're all in the NBA, for 35 games, 30 games. And I'm pretty sure Washington didn't make the tournament.
No.
So you didn't see him play against the elite teams. So you just don't know what you got.
Yeah, they had, 9-10 wins this year. So, it's funny, too, because, how doctors are supposed to have the bedside manner. So you start with the good prognosis and the good news, and then all of a sudden you come down with and I respect that. And it's funny because I've kind of heard the same thing you have, which also, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about this. It also tells you that Danny Ainge and the Celtics believe they can find a player in this draft, top 5, that they believe is on the same level or better than he is if they're willing to part ways with the top overall pick. That's my sentiment. And then conversely, the Sixers believe, no, he can't miss. That's why we're doing it. So, like you said, somewhere that
it could be a combination of the two. And
right.
Sort of the third entity here is Danny Ainge's team is comprised much differently from the Sixers. And the best player the Celtics have had in years is a 5'10" point guard. So I don't know that you need a 6'5" point guard when scoring guards with, who don't – they're in a position where they think that they can compete with the Cavaliers for the Eastern Conference Championship for the next 3 or 4 years. Markelle Fultz will not be a complete player until 3 or 4 years from now. So if they think they can get a really good, complementary piece in Tatum or Josh or whoever it is who can contribute this year, that's what they have to do in their situation. If they thought that they were 2 or 3 years away, then clearly, they don't retain Isaiah Thomas, trade Isaiah Thomas, and they go after Markelle Fultz. If they think Markelle Fultz is the guy,
right?
We can't really infer from what they're doing that he's not the guy.
No, it's a great point, and you're right. They want to compete now, and LeBron, he's not showing signs of slowing down, but eventually he will. You mentioned Fultz; he's 19, so for a fact, if anything, they'll start Bayless this season, and when the kid's ready to play, he gets a little more acclimated to the speed of the NBA game, and then I'm sure he's going to see some action. You brought up an interesting point. Look, I look at it like this. I'm not the big fan of the hypotheticals, because the bottom line is I need to see Simmons healthy. I need to see Embiid for a full season, whether it's a minutes restriction or not. I don't believe he's going to be capable of playing 36 minutes. I still think they're going to ease him into it. But if healthy and you insert the 19-year-old somewhere along the way next year, I think it's realistic to think the jump they made from 10 to 28 in a weaker Eastern Conference, where within 2 years they should not be a playoff team, whether it's an 8th seed, a 7th seed, a 6th seed. What transpired in the past. Now, you got to start playing winning basketball. You got to play competitive basketball. Can you realistically, do you believe they will be a playoff team within 2 to 3 years?
Yes, I do. And for the reasons you stated, every team really from 4 to 8 in the Eastern Conference is kind of a bubble playoff team. You don't have to be very good to be very relevant in the Eastern Conference. And, if Embiid is healthy, even for 50 or 60 games at 28 minutes, 30 minutes a game, he's a difference maker. They have a real chance to beat almost every team with him in the lineup if he is is in fact viable. We don't know anything about Ben Simmons, and the interesting thing about the Fultz move, it to me indicates that they're not sold that these guys are viable either. They know that they need more really, really excellent players. I don't think they see Markelle Fultz as, a top 100 in, NFL, NBA history player, or maybe even an all-star more than, 2 or 3 times. However, he's probably the only guy in this draft who does fit that description. And as such, they think they have to get him because they don't know what else they have.
Yeah. The other interesting thing that I think kind of goes unnoticed, and then I want to switch gears a little bit with you. Last one to kind of close out the Sixers. Now I think we can start to say, okay, they're getting the pieces in place. They made that jump from 10 plus 18 to 28. Dario emerged. He looks like he's a nice role player. You know what you get in Embiid and sample size. You're hoping, praying, wishing Simmons is going to be fully healthy and you believe what he can do when he's out on the floor. If all that falls into place, then can we really get a better sense of how good or how bad a head coach Brett Brown can be or will be?
Well, for my money, Brett Brown has no questions to answer as far as can he develop players, install a system repeatedly, and have the players develop. I mean, Embiid, having not played basketball very much in his life and having not played basketball at all for 2 years, he gets a pass for the next 10 years, does Brett Brown, as far as I'm concerned. And what he did with T.J. McConnell, their point guard, who was undrafted and unwanted. He was just, training camp fodder. Now he's a viable backup point guard in the NBA who LeBron James wanted. So on that level, Brett Brown has earned his stripes. There are 2 more steps. Can you take pretty good players, make them very good, and then can you take very good players and win with them? But he's answered the first question. He'll have a head coaching job for life in the NBA after what he did, especially this season, what he did with Sarge during the season, McConnell over 2 seasons, and Embiid off the get.
All right, I know I got you for a couple more minutes. Let's switch gears. The next time we'll be looking at the Philadelphia Eagles late July, early August with training camp. And I'm just curious, the moves that they made with Smith and Jeffrey, I think the LeGarrette Blount move was kind of a sneaky under-the-radar move. Listen, even if you need to give him 20 to 25 carries, I think it gives him that short yardage red zone presence where defenses will have to at least, you can keep that run defense a little honest, and maybe it opens up some play action down there for Carson Wentz. We know about the secondary. We know about the offensive line. I'm just curious. You have a quarterback going into the NFL, their second season, with a second-year head coach in Doug Pederson. I do think pressure's on Carson Wentz this year. I really do. I think he performed at times brilliantly last year, and I give Doug credit, a ton of credit for what he was able to do. They trade Bradford. You throw this kid in 8 days before the season. My question, though, is how much pressure falls on Doug Pederson this year from a coaching standpoint? Because I still think the jury's still out on him.
Well, yes, there's a lot of pressure on Doug Pederson. He needs to be able to show improvement not only with Carson Wentz, but primarily with Carson Wentz, but also with the young interior linemen that they have. And he needs to be able to show that he can integrate Torrey Smith and Alshon Jeffrey, the 2 wide receivers that'll be 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 in their rotation this year. He has to show that he can integrate them seamlessly and, of course, have Wentz progress.
Right.
But one thing that I think that people are taking for granted is the offensive line, and the offensive line's play last year was mediocre. Jason Peters went to the Pro Bowl on reputation alone. He was not that good.
You're preaching to the choir, my friend.
So I don't know that we know that the offensive line is good. I think everything about the offense is a little bit better, but I'm not sure a little bit better gets you more than 8 or 9 wins. And then we can have the discussion, is that enough to keep Pederson moving forward? And how much of Carson Wentz's development is Pederson/Frank Reich specific? Does he need them to continue? Because honestly, Carson Wentz was a lot better at the beginning of the season last year than he was in training camp, and he was a lot better at the end of the season than he was at the beginning of the season. Yeah. So there is progress, and he's a lot better now than he was at the end of the season. So Doug Pederson, Frank Reich, and John DeFilippo are doing their jobs. We'll see how much Howie Roseman, the general manager, and Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, appreciate that, and we'll see how much Jeffrey Lurie thinks that Howie Roseman is the right guy to continue this, especially if you fire the coach. Do you let Howie Roseman hire a third coach that you have to fire after 2 or 3 years?
And then you start to become the Jets, the Jacksonvilles, the Cleveland Browns,
exactly.
Because there's no consistency. And then how are you going to bring in a free agent when they know you got a dead man walking in a head coach? Real quick, before I let you get it, I want to go back to your point with the line. I'm not as high on the offensive line as others are because, listen, when Johnson's out there, he plays well. I get it, and I know they do have some depth. Kelsey, to me, I think that's one of the weak links, and I know what they did with the contract with Peters. He's not the player he once was, and it just seems like there's going to be a Sunday where you say, man, you know what, Father Time has caught up to him, and that's the toughest position because you're basically blocking the quarterback's blind side at the left tackle position.
We've said this about Jason Kelsey several times in the last 2 years, especially early last season, and we've said it several times about Jason Peters since he's come back from his Achilles injury. You know, does he get hurt too quickly and easily? Is he compromised? Certainly he's not the Jason Peters from 5 or 6 years ago who was the best offensive lineman in the entire game, not just the franchise. He might be the third best offensive lineman in the franchise right now. And if that's the case, if he doesn't play better this year than last year, then the contract extension was a mistake, and maybe retaining him, not cutting him, was a mistake.
Yeah, because I actually thought he was going to be one of those players potentially on the hot seat. Marcus, I appreciate a couple moments. Always great to catch up. Always appreciate the insight. You know we'll talk during the summer, my friend.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it.
You got to take care of yourself. Marcus Hayes, always good stuff.